Hello and welcome to the Minds on the Frontline Podcast, brought to you by the Frontline Strong Together 5 program. FST5 provides streamlined access to behavioral and mental health services, as well as crisis resources for Michigan's Frontline 5 workers and their families. This includes all professional, part-time, and volunteer firefighters, EMS, law enforcement, corrections officers, and 911 dispatchers in Michigan and their immediate family members. First responders and mental health experts collaboratively created FST5 to provide 24/7 live support, effective resources, and cutting-edge services to prevent and alleviate PTSD, anxiety, depression, and other frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. Need help now? If you are a frontline worker in Michigan or an immediate family member experiencing any crisis, work-related, substance abuse, depression, relationships, finances, or any other, reach out by calling 1-833-34-STRONG or go to fst5.org for more information. I'm Jeff Lassers, one of the hosts of the Minds on the Frontline podcast, and I'm a professional firefighter, paramedic, educator, and content creator. Minds on the Frontline is co-hosted by Mike Mattern, who is also a professional firefighter and paramedic. In addition, Mike is a peer support team member for his fire department and the Frontline Strong Together 5 program, a board member of the Michigan Crisis Response Association, and the former chair of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union Behavioral Health Committee. Mike has training and experience with frontline worker mental and behavioral health. On the other hand, I do not. My role is to produce the show, whereas Mike is our resident subject matter expert. Together, we hope to inform, educate, and entertain frontline workers, their families, and the public regarding the realities of frontline work-related mental and behavioral health challenges. In today's episode, we welcome Mike Wierenga, a retired law enforcement officer with over 31 years of service, and the co-founder of To the Rescue. Mike brings a wealth of experience from his career in public safety and shares how his passion for mental health advocacy has shaped his organization's mission to support first responders. During this episode, we explore the early career experiences that inspired Mike's dedication to addressing frontline mental health challenges. Drawing from his work with To the Rescue, Mike shares invaluable lessons and highlights how his organization provides critical training and resources for first responders and their families. Finally, we discuss actionable strategies for departments to proactively support the mental and behavioral health of their frontline workers. As always, we aim to provide a meaningful conversation that informs, educates, and inspires those on the front lines and their families. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you, and enjoy the show. Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Morning.
I'm doing good. How are you guys?
I can't complain. We're better here. You're here with us.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough for this opportunity. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, Thanks for driving down.
We've been wanting to get you on here for a hot minute, man.
It's been a while.
Yeah, and you've been in Michigan based for a while. You go outside of Michigan, obviously.
Yeah.
You're a well-traveled person that travels all around the state. All of the Frontline 5 get to know who you are and what your partner Terry have done with To the Rescue. But before we get into all of that, who are you? What do you do? Where do you do it?
Yeah, well, my career started out 31 years ago. Well, actually 32 now because I've been retired for 1 year. And by the way, if we ever get into that conversation, I highly recommend that, but we'll do that when we get there. But 31 years as a law enforcement officer, 18 years as a firefighter, medical first responder. Kind of a neat deal for me because it was I had the ability to kind of do both. It was a career job in law enforcement. It was a paid on-call part-time in the fire service. We ran both fire, ALS, ambulance, and in 2.5, 3 townships that we worked with. So career job started out in the city of Wayland as a police officer, and then got hired in Grand Rapids City and worked up there for almost a 29-year career. One of the things that's kind of a cool deal about my career is I was always on the front lines. I worked patrol. I was a firefighter on the nozzle. I never tested for promotion. I enjoyed being the one doing the work, and that was something I always enjoyed doing. So kind of early into my career, I kind of realized, there was an interest that I had on the peer support side of things of man, this is a really cool gig. I mean, we do amazing things. This is a freaking awesome job, we give so much to this community, but boy, every once in a while we get done with some of the stuff, we're kind of like wiping our brow going, holy crap, we don't do a very good job taking care of each other. And it was kind of something early on in my career that I started looking at on, is this just the norm? Do we go out and do these amazing things in the community, but have sometimes a horrific reaction to it, but then just roll hose or get in the cruiser and drive away and don't have any chat about it? So it was something that's kind of interested me very early on. And that's kind of where I started looking at how do you do a better job of taking care of one another, as fellow brother and sister responders. And got involved in our peer support team. The Grand Rapids Police Department had their own peer support team, and the fire department had their own. We did a lot of work and training together. But it was something that's very near and dear to me. And I was very blessed to be involved. I think by the time I retired, I had almost 650 hours of critical incident stress management training, everything to do with all the SISM elements, to do the debriefings, diffusions, to do one-on-ones, suicide awareness for first responders, a lot of family programs. We started to really develop some different programs for how this stuff affects the loved ones at home. My wife and I actually were sent by our organization to a couples resiliency for first responders program several years ago. Kind of came back and developed that for new recruits and did a lot of work with that. So, early on, it was just something that, I had a passion in and kind of ran with that and did that as I was still doing the career, but then just doing the amazing work that we do and then step back and think, okay, that was weird, or that was a rough call, and what are we doing to take care of each other so we're prepared to go do it again and again and again. And so that was something that was very near and dear to my heart, and I enjoyed doing that, and that opened up some opportunities to do some training at Grand Valley State. And really one of the first programs that we did when it comes to our career survival class was at the academy, and really saying, hey, we got to do a better job of educating now our new responders in this gig on, hey, you're going to get on this hell of a roller coaster ride of a career, but let's prepare you for it. And so then that kind of opened the doors that really got me into some other areas of realizing how important it is, not just in our organization, but then we did this class at the academy, and then I went back and said, I'm going to do this for the fire department. And we had never done anything like that before. And this would have been back in probably 2002, maybe 2002, 2003. And some things just continued to go down that road. And from there, I found a passion that I love doing the job, but I also love taking care of each other. We're amazing people doing amazing work, but it pulls on my heartstrings that sometimes the challenges that we have doing this job for all the first responders, all the umbrella that we're talking about today, and how do we do it and do it healthy? How can we stay just as healthy the day we retired than the day we started? And so that's kind of one of the areas that I went into, and that's kind of where I
Seems
really
like
got
that's
involved.
your fundamental baseline is
Yeah.
how do we keep doing this better and also in a balanced way that keeps us all healthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think it's important, when we started that in the recruit classes, getting in front of you before you start the career. As a recruit, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So you sit there and you have these conversations. They're like, well, I don't need this stuff. And I don't know what they're talking about. And then 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years into the gig, you see somebody that went through a class years ago, and you're like, yeah, I remember having that discussion like way back when and thinking, I didn't need any of this. Now I'm married. I have a kid at home. This has changed. This was a call that was affecting me differently. And so it has some very unique challenges. And that's very rewarding, to me, because I know it works, and that's something that if we can plan out the right way to do this and make sure we're educating our brothers and sisters pre-career, about mid-career, and right into retirement, I think we can change the mindset, truly change the mindset of first responders and, worrying about, signs of weakness and I'm afraid to say anything, or am I going to put on,
Yeah, you're not just talking about dissolving stigma. You're talking about a paradigm shift.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference.
Absolutely.
Removing the presence of a negative thing that would stop me from getting help is much different than a purposeful paradigm shift of health and going after the things that are going to continue to make me better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or prevent me from getting worse.
Well, I think you're building up that resiliency right off the rip. You know what I mean? That you're giving them the tools to deal with these things prior to them dealing with them. It should be in every academy. It should be in every training of new hires is how to deal with these things. This is as important as throwing a ladder, learning how to do a felony stop. This is how to start an IV, how to answer a 911 call, because all of those will lead to possibly a mental or behavioral health problem. Why are we not giving these new recruits that opportunity? We've all been through it when we didn't have it.
Sure.
We've seen how it does not work out well for them.
Right.
So why are we not giving them the tools to do this and get it taken care of before they get into these situations?
Right.
We're doing them an injustice by not doing it.
Absolutely.
Because we know the outcome.
Yeah. Our generation's job is to leave the next generation of first responders in a better position. And let's start with this.
Yes.
Because
I think
this is something that I know works.
Yes.
We know it works.
Right. It's been experimented.
You've seen it work.
Absolutely.
Right. Obviously, there's a hyper motivation for you to be a part of your brothers and sisters maintaining health and wellness, especially on the mental and behavioral side. So when did you realize that behavioral and mental health issues are real-life concerns for frontline workers? It wasn't like you're like, hey, because some people, they're like, oh, that sounds cool, I'm going to do SWAT. That sounds cool, I'm going to do high-angle rescue. Nobody says, that sounds cool, I want everybody to call me on my phone and tell me they're having horrible times or something bad's going on. Nobody wishes that, right? So give us the why on that.
Right. And we don't go into this career with that mindset. We don't go into day one of our job going, oh, yep, after that bad call, I'm going to go cry on your shoulder. Because that's not what it's about. No. But do we have something in place that one of the biggest calls that stuck with me was very early on in my career. We went on just a horrific fatal crash. And mom and dad were killed instantly in this crash. And they had a 10-year-old daughter in the back seat. And they were pinned in the car. And we get on scene. We've got to start cutting this car apart to get the girl out. And hearing her screams and just screaming mom and dad's name. I'm just sitting there going, oh, my gosh, this is horrendous. And I've been a firefighter about 6 months. And nobody told me this stuff was going to happen. I'm thinking, we got these big-ass trucks we're going to drive. We're going to cut shit apart. We're putting fires out. And all of a sudden you get on this one. And it was very early on in my career. So we go through the whole event. And obviously mom and dad were dead. Nothing we could do. And you know how the fatal crash. They're long drawn-out investigations. But we cut the car apart, got the little girl out. And we just kind of hung out, a lot of downtime. Get done, cut the car apart, get the bodies out, do our thing. Well, we get done, we go back, and we put all our equipment away, and we all just went home. I'm like, it just must, I'm at this time, I'm probably maybe 19, 20 years old. So I'm pretty young at this point. And I'm like, that's how we do it.
Right, you get to right there. Yeah. They just trained you on the SOG on how to handle that situation. Which I'm not saying it's their fault. I'm just saying the circumstances of that world was that's how you handle it.
Absolutely. Yep. And there was no right or wrong way to handle it. I mean, this is a lot of years ago, and some people may not have been affected by that call one bit. Right. And some people may have.
Maybe they have really good coping skills that can absorb that and then process it in a very healthy way.
Absolutely.
But their Zen appearance is not helping you going through it at 19, 20, being trained on how to process that. It would have been nice to know if any of those people like, oh, yeah, you just do this or whatever it was they were doing.
It was wild because, that was early in the career. And then I was also just right after that gotten into the law enforcement as my career job. Third day of my law enforcement career, I'm on a homicide scene. I didn't grow up in that environment. So for me, all of a sudden to think, what am I doing here? And it's just you go through the motions. You go out, you put work face on, and we're freaking good at doing that. Yeah. And we go do amazing work, but sometimes we forget, does work face come off, or do we go into our personal lives and is work face going there? I mean, there's things that happen. There's
especially when you put the uniform on, it's this weird symbolic PPE you put on.
Absolutely.
It's a cry protector. Yep. As long as I'm at work with my crew, I don't feel like real life sadness. Watching people go through it hurts me as much in the moment. Yeah, it doesn't mean I don't capture those frames of reference and memories, but in the moment, I'm like, let me help you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that goes for all of us. I think you have to have that mindset, though, to go to work.
To get through the call.
And do things that we do is you have to have that certain mindset. But like you said, it's sometimes hard to turn that off. We're very good at compartmentalizing things.
Totally.
We are some of the best compartmentalizers known to man because we have to.
Yeah.
But what our problem is we don't take that box back off the shelf once we put it on there.
Yeah.
Or we don't switch it off as much.
My wife said to me early on in my career, she goes, you put like a work face on.
Yep.
She goes, you're all of a sudden you become work Mike.
Probably when the phone rings too. Yeah. Like even when you pick it up, it's Mike. Yeah. Like it's probably like, then you go back. Yeah, I do the same thing.
And we all do. And we all have that. And we have to have that. That's what makes you a good first responder. That's what makes you a good corrections officer. That's what makes you a good dispatcher. You flip the switch, you go to work and you do amazing things. Mm-hmm. But damn, we struggle when we go back into our personal lives a lot of times.
There's a cost.
Absolutely. And to go back to kind of that question is when did that really hit me? I think it hit me fairly early on in my career. Not that there was a right or wrong way to deal with that, but I'm just like, okay, what do I do now when I go back home? You saw a
gap, and you're like, you were honest enough with yourself not to fill it with a bad coping mechanism. Right. You actually asked yourself the question, am I okay with this? Which is extremely mature for a young person to ask themselves that.
And I was terrified at that age to ask any senior officer, firefighter, medic, hey, there's dead people laying in the ditch, and we walk around them like they're not there. Well, yeah, because we got other stuff to do.
Right.
And it just blew my mind.
Really kind of step in your shoes. I started riding an ambulance 2 weeks after I turned 18. And I was working with 20, 30, 40-year-olds.
Yeah.
And they were either burned out already, so they weren't going to show me the way. You learn everything from your environment.
Oh, man.
And I was 18 or 19 doing my first pediatric cardiac arrest. And afterwards, it was the same. Nobody talked about it. And I'm just like floored. You know, I'm still a kid, to be honest. I mean, I'm still a kid at this point. You're right. It's one of those things that your environment teaches you how you deal with these things. And if you're in that environment where nobody teaches you how to deal with it, you're going to fill that void one way or the other. You filled it with knowledge. But, you know, how many have we seen that fill it with booze, drugs, whatever else?
It doesn't even need to be anything like that. It could be like you overwork your side job or you do something the avoidance is the key.
Avoidance.
Sometimes it's alcohol and drugs and partying. Sometimes it's literally avoiding it and doing anything else.
Yeah.
Not deal with it.
Yeah.
Let me pick up as much overtime so I don't have to go home and think about it.
Yeah.
You know what scares me when you talk about just not dealing with it and avoiding it is I'm at a point now in my life where I'm spending a lot of time with a lot of retirees. Mm-hmm. And it's concerning to me and how many of our retirees haven't dealt with it their whole career. You know, so now you talk about that 7, 10, 12, 15, 30-year veteran when you're that new guy, and they just go through the motions, and they almost to the point where we start dehumanizing people, you know, and that can be very dangerous because now you don't have there's no emotions left. There's no emotional connection to calls for service or helping out your fellow human being in their time of need. And we get through this retirement, we go out and 6, 8 weeks, a month, a year, 6 years into it, you realize, holy crap. I didn't deal with any of this stuff in my career. Now here I am, and I got some things I got to do. And I just had lunch with a retiree the other day, and I got no problem saying it. 3 times in the conversation, we teared up. And we're grown-ass men, did a whole career in this deal, and we're just sitting around the table having lunch. The emotions were very raw. Right. And we're like, well, shit, did we do something wrong throughout our career? And then you kind of start second-guessing yourself, well, geez, how did we deal with this stuff? And then I felt bad for stuff he was going through. And
you're feeding off that, too, because you're almost sharing that emotion with him because you know.
Oh, yeah.
What's up, right? And so a lifetime or a career of this stuff building up, and we're watching all these retirees either keep holding it in and watching that manifest itself in physical illness, ailments, or just complaints and just not feeling good. We got to get to the point where we teach people throughout their entire careers with continuous touch points that are catered to them and what they need to maintain balance.
Absolutely.
And we can do it. We definitely can do it. So before we get into more of what we can do and what To the Rescue is doing, and specifically to help those things, let's help people understand a little bit more clear the difference between law enforcement and your other 4 cousins of fire, EMS, dispatch, and corrections. Now, you have a nuanced perspective because you were in the fire service, you've been on fire trucks, you've put out fires, you've even done the medicals. And then you were a cop. Right? So you really can separate the two. So help everybody appreciate the nuanced heartaches and mental and behavioral health risks that law enforcement's endure.
Sure. I think one of the things that we struggle with today is just society in general. You know, as a whole, I was doing a communication skills class not long ago, and there was an article that was brought up on customer service rage in America, and I didn't know that existed. And I'm reading through this thing, and it talks about how 1 out of 4 people in this survey said it's now acceptable behavior in society to cuss, swear, not pay attention to the rules and just behave a certain way. And 1 out of 4 people. And I think what's happening is as first responders, the whole umbrella is being inserted into that more frequently. Now, in the law enforcement side of things, we've always laughed over the years. They like it when the big truck shows up, but they don't like it when law enforcement's there. And there's, so there is some different elements on face value. And over the years on several fire and medical related calls, we might be there just as safety, but I'll step back and let fire and EMS do their thing just to kind of de-escalate, if you will, just by the uniform being there. So sometimes just the mindset of law enforcement can create a little bit more stresses than if fire and EMS is involved. But one of the things I think that's challenging today is, and this is for all of them, every one of us, police, fire, EMS, corrections, even dispatch has fallen into this, where we always were held to a professional standard. And in today's society, I truly believe that professional standard has turned into a standard of perfection. Because if we make a mistake, we're being charged criminally, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's a fire EMS related issue or a licensing being affected by it, or There's a case, I believe I read it not that long ago, for dispatch on how they handled the priority of the call and getting resources there. And not just a civil lawsuit, but there was a criminal lawsuit that came out, or a criminal investigation on were the resources sent appropriately and quickly enough. And so I think we're struggling a little bit there. Law enforcement maybe dealt with that a little bit more so, but man, all of our brothers and sisters under the umbrella are dealing with that.
Well, we're feeling it fire EMS too.
Absolutely.
Especially on the EMS side of things.
Oh, 100%.
And we're certainly not under the microscope like you are. So like we feel it from our own internal, and the groups that kind of maintain the quality assurance, you start to feel it from them. But
sure.
You guys feel it from John Q. Citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add the corrections brothers and sisters of this group here too, is I think that they have a whole new challenge with mental health in the inside. I mean, whether they're in a prison system or a jail system, but the whole element of our mental health needs in society as a whole, and whether you look at them going through an emergency room of a hospital and right back to their homes or to their families, and then something happens where now all of a sudden they're being arrested and they're in that environment, and that's a whole nother challenge that, when you look at the stresses and maybe some coping mechanisms. Law enforcement officers a lot of times, depending where you're at, are solo. So, we'll show up together and go. You look at fire and EMS, it's a little different. Fire, you're going to have that crew. You're going to have that group that might work a scene, go back to the station, clean up. But the opportunities are there for more communication if need be. You look at your EMS side of things, generally there's 2 in the rig. So, again, cleaning up, they might have those conversations. Dispatchers, I worry a lot about them because that's just constant. They plug and unplug, and they don't have the ability just to take a deep breath. Depending on a lot of the centers, they don't have the ability to get up and walk around and take a deep breath because of staffing. Mm-hmm. And then the correction side of it again, they walk in the doors and they're committed to an area. Now they again have teams or crews maybe they can deal with if you have one of those events or one of those, a hanging in the jail that maybe you and I can chat at over coffee if we get a break. But it blows me away on when we teach these programs all over the state in all of our entities on how many people are doing more with less. Mm-hmm. Everybody's doing more with less.
Consistently.
All across the board. And everybody's affected by that, whether it's the workload or the resiliency or taking a break, and nursing. I mean, the nurses are falling into this category. We've been doing a lot of our career survival classes with the helping profession as a whole in today's society is busy. And that's a good problem to have, but how are we doing taking care of ourselves? And we give so much to everybody else.
The ultimate service industry.
Give to everybody, but then darn, we have a tough time taking a deep breath and hey, let's you and I go chat.
Yep.
See how things are going.
Well, the hard thing is that we're so overwhelmed already. Mm-hmm. That even our off time, like we got kids and lives. Yeah. What do they have?
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
need time and energy, and they can't, wait for me to be ready to be dad all the time.
They want you dad the second you hit the door.
Before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I could hear him on the phone on my way home.
Yes.
We go back. We'll kind of come back to this work face that my wife had brought up to me, and she really opened my eyes probably about 20 years into my career. Where she said, I look at you and you put this work mic face on and you're like a different person. She goes, but what I want you to try to understand from my perspective is, can you step through the portal? Come through the portal and come home, mm-hmm. Be my husband, be a good neighbor, be a good dad, be a good brother, be a good son to your mother, be a good friend to your best friend from high school. And then when you have to flip that switch, put that work face back on and go through the portal and go to work. She goes, I know why you have to do what you have to do to be safe at work. It makes us good first responders. We have to have, we have to flip switch. But going through the portal to come back to be the dad before you pull in the driveway, that's not always easy to do.
Yeah, Officer Mike can stay at Officer Mike.
Absolutely.
He's got to take a phone call, and they're just and it's hard.
It is hard.
It sounds easy, but it's so hard because you think your subconscious turned off. No, you have to turn off your outward-facing appearance and your engagement with everybody around you. You're not going to stop your subconscious from thinking or ruminating on something. Because for you, it's like, oh, I got this, I got that, I got to handle it. Like just thinking about all the great things you do at Do the Rescue, scheduling logistics, planning, all this stuff, smoke classes. It's a lot of stuff going on, right?
It's a ton.
So to then give your family all that attention on top of that is a huge ask, and we all have to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's different for everybody. Everybody's got to figure out how you step through the portal.
Without a doubt.
I can't tell you how to step through a portal. I can't tell you how to step. Mine is driving home. I turn on music and I listen to music on the way home. That's my Right. But it took me how many years to figure that out?
Oh, sure.
To know you needed it without.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
To figure out how I step through that portal or step through that door. It took a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
because it was, you'd get home and you're like, man, I don't want to, I just want to go to bed. But, or like you had a run right before you got off and you're like still hyped from that. And, but it's different for everybody. Everybody has to find that. What is it that gets you back?
Without that, what is it being something that can hurt you long term? Drugs, alcohol, sex, drugs, rock and roll, whatever the thing is.
Yes.
We got to avoid that. And sometimes it's not as obvious.
And it's a little hard. Like I only live probably less than 10 minutes from work. So I don't have.
You don't get away.
Some people, so some people might have a 30, 40 minute,
That's me. I can get away from it.
That gives you enough time to decompress, whatever. But you have to find that thing that just brings you back to Mike, Jeff, whatever it is, dad, husband. You got to find it.
Yeah. And it's so important to understand that it's different for everybody.
Yes.
Because we can't just sit here and say, okay, we've got 20 people on the shift, 20 people, this is what we're going to do. When you get done today, do A, B, and C. And that's not how it works. It's different for every individual. It's different for every relationship.
Yep.
Sometimes it's different per shift or assignment. Certain assignments that people have nowadays that maybe take more while you're at work, but also take more in the personal life, whether it's a call out or a specialty unit where you're doing things at home and leaving home without a normal schedule. So you're absolutely right. It's so important to realize, hey, what works for you and I may not work for this couple or this relationship with my son or my daughter or my parents, and it's so very different for each person.
Yeah, and having that communication with whoever's at home, like you have some type of code word when you go home.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I went home, I would just say I had a bad day. That meant I need a little extra time, I need a little extra space, I need this. Having that is super important as well, because it's when you walk through the door, you need that. But we're not good at saying when you walk through the door, hey, I need a little bit of space.
You just need an easy way for somebody to recognize it and be on the same page, which starts with years of the relationship building and all that.
And I think all 5 of the entities have that. I mean, the stresses are very similar. They might be a little different from certain elements, but a use of force might be a little bit different reaction than it would be a running low on air on an SCBA and an interior structure fight. Yep. But the stresses and reactions may have some similarities.
Yes.
And what are we doing with those? And that's
being asked to continually go down that road. So we're not just giving our random recommendations here. Let's get into more what To the Rescue does. So you actually put into action all of these recommendations in the form of classes, courses, information, high fives, all sorts of stuff you guys do over To the Rescue. So give everybody an overview of when, how, and why did you and Terry start To the Rescue?
Well, it kind of goes back to that very first class that we were doing at Grand Valley, and we had an instructor meeting, and it started out with, how do we do a better job of new people coming into this career? And my background was peer support, SISM, a lot of training, personal line of duty deaths and suicide, and did some debriefings and stuff. A ton of that from my perspective. Terry comes from a very powerful story about suicide, suicidal thoughts. He had gone through a time in his career that he told a story that was extremely powerful. And so we're in this instructor meeting, and I said, why don't we do a presentation for the new recruits? And let's include their families. And that's kind of where it started. And Terry says, absolutely. So we did it at the academy. We did it at my fire department. And shortly after that, we met with Michigan Firefighter Training Council. We went with MCOLs. And this is probably about 05, 06-ish, probably when we really started saying, hey, we got to share this with everybody. Why are we not doing this with people around the state? Why are we not doing this with all of our brother and sister responders and their families? And that was an important part of what we wanted to do. And so we really focused on 3 categories that were the number 1 and number 2 line of duty death for police, fire, and EMS is where it started. And it was a driving program, a scene safety, traffic direction control, and the career survival. And historically, over the years, the career survival class was a hard sell. I mean, people, we don't need that stuff. We're not going to talk about it.
I remember when you started, and it was people would be like,
Yeah. They're like, I had a chief tell me a week and a half ago, I didn't want to come to this class. I saw what it was, didn't want to come. And 42 years in the fire service and a career in corrections, he says, I am so glad I came because everything you guys talked about is stuff I've gone through in my career.
You don't fluff it up.
It is. It's raw. It's just we talk about stuff that is raw. And we talk about relationships. We talk about our marriage. My wife and I's marriage struggled, and she's team teaching with me a lot now. Terry's been going through some medical issues, and he hasn't been able to be on the road with me as we used to. And when we first started the program, we started here. And then it got bigger, and then those circles got bigger, and then it started with mutual aid departments, and then we had a police department want to do it, and To the Rescue now officially started in 2007. We've been all over the state, a couple of national conferences, depending on what the topic was, and a lot of wide variety of career survival, peer support, how to build a team, how to maintain a team. What does CISM look like? Is your peer support team trained in CISM? So we have the same concepts doing a lot of the work. My wife and I started doing a lot of work in building resiliencies for first responder couples, but also teaching the academies and their families and their kids. Before you get into this deal, there's some things you need to be aware of. And so it's really kind of how it started. And Terry and I were so blessed because the more we did it, the more feedback we were getting. And then that ball just started to roll down the hill. Those doors started to open up, and that created a wide variety of different training programs. And then we started doing communication skills, threat assessment, active shooter de-escalation. The follow-up to the career survival class was people said, well, what next? So then we created some programs that post-traumatic stress, first responder suicide, risky behavior. What does that look like? What does it sound like? And I have been so blessed to be able to go out and teach thousands of first responders and their families on a wide variety of topics in this area. And I love it because I know it works. The feedback we get, an email, a phone call from a spouse, hey, my husband's a firefighter here and he struggled with this, or hey, we attended your class 9 years ago and A, B, and C is taking place now, and it's just very rewarding. So it's a way that I can give back and continue to give back to an amazing career that I had, but to give back, like we said earlier, to that next generation. Mm-hmm. Let's make these people as healthy as we can so they can retire just as happy as they were the day they started. And that is not an easy task.
I've been to a career survival class, I think, 3 times.
Yeah.
And we hosted 2 of them, but one of the first classes when we started to get into peer support was the To the Rescue class, the career survival class. And every time you pick up something new.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's a great class. If you guys are listening, get a hold of them, get the class in there. It's going to make a huge difference to your department, your people, your members.
And you're one of the byproducts of organizations like his, because you were inspired a group like Mike 10 years ago. You didn't have the leverage and the time on the job to really make a big splash.
Yes.
Now, over that time and staying with it over a long time, you grow on that a little bit. You collect a mic in your Rolodex. Mm-hmm. You work together. You collaborate, and you prove yourself through merits. And so now you're seeing entire groups be put together. Shout out Colby Taylor.
Yeah,
Colby's another one of those guys.
I laughed. Colby went to our program once, and he called me the next day. He says, "Hey, I want to teach what you're teaching. What do I need to do?"
That's Colby.
And we had a great conversation. I said, "You're the next generation of doing this, so let's have a discussion about it.
Right.
Yep. How do you start in your fire academy? How do you start in your in-service training? How do you start with your local first responders? Maybe not just this program, but something in this topic." And that's been rewarding over the years because Terry and I look back and think, when we first started running around the state, I met with some folks in leadership in Lansing and said, we could be at the front lines in this nation on this program with first responders in our state. And some people were very excited about it. Some we didn't think that we didn't need it. And today, I look at where we are today. I still believe we have a lot of work to do.
Oh, huge.
But we have peer support teams are popping up. We have critical stress management teams at a county level or a countywide or organizations, depending on resources for organizations. But more trainings are coming up. The work you're doing and the work that you're doing, the work this has become, it's becoming a little bit more normal. And that's the key. And that's very rewarding because just sitting around, fighting some of those battles is, man, are we going to keep doing this? Do people have any interest in this? And now I look back and we have reached out to thousands of people and planted little seeds around the state. And it's awesome.
The proof is in the pudding. It wasn't like some big group came along and said, all of you need this.
Right.
No, you created a very small group.
Right.
And they said, we need this themselves.
Yep.
And then you figured out how to grow it organically, which is how it speaks to all of its merits.
Yeah.
And a big shout out to those chiefs over the last 10 years there's a lot of chiefs. I would say a majority of chiefs, and that for all the 5, the bosses, the managers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
They've done a much better job as a majority heading in the right direction and not pushing this stuff away. There's always going to be dissenters. There's always going to be naysayers. But as a big, giant group of people in charge of even bigger groups of people, a majority of them are doing great things to really put people like you in front of their personnel to help them.
Sure. Yeah, and I think what's causing some of that is the information, the education we're talking more about, and I think we're getting into that next generation of leadership.
Yeah.
That is either one, realizing the individual needs or struggles they had But then we're talking more about this where 20 years ago, you had a new fire recruit coming to sit at the table, or you had a new police officer, or you had a new medic sitting running that rig, and anybody ever brought up, well, that call bothered me. You'd kick their ass out of the rig. You'd tell them, nope, you're out. Hang up your gear and get out of this organization, because that's how we handled it. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have, and right or wrong, we didn't know a lot of this stuff, or we didn't know it to the experiences that we have now. And the paradigm shift, it's there. I mean, I think we got a little farther to go.
Well, now we're improving upon it. Now we're not being passive about it. Now we're past the awareness level.
The momentum is moving the other way.
Now it's operations
we're not
time.
there yet, but at least we have the momentum behind it.
And I think the key to that too is it's not one fits all.
Agreed.
Because some people are going to go through this career and be absolutely solid throughout their whole career.
They probably have a good community. They probably have a healthy lifestyle. They got it. You know what I mean? They have all of the things. We're trying to help people that don't,
exactly,
who end up down this road.
Yep.
So it's almost like we got to look at those people the same way and say, what is keeping this person together? It's not just they're just genetically better gifted.
Right. Absolutely.
A lot of it's just like they were lucky enough to be either brought up in a really good situation to be resilient, or have actively do. Either way, what is the common denominators there?
Well, someone taught them that resiliency somewhere along the way.
Either objectively or subjectively. It might have been in passing they learned it through just watching their parents or their loved ones, right?
Well, and that kind of goes back to one of the slides in that in the career survival class that every time I teach, I said, I wish I could get this slide in every academy in this country, because it would change the mindset of our professions. And it talks about how does a critical incident affect the individual, and it's different for every single person. Because it has to do with your life story, it has to do with your upbringing, it has to do with previous calls for service. There's a lot of moving parts there. There's not just stamp it and this is how you're going to go through your career.
Right.
But we need to educate ourselves on it. We need to be aware of that. And that's the key.
One of the biggest things I've learned doing all this stuff, there's no cookie cutter approach.
Absolutely.
You cannot cookie cut this anyway. It's all based on an individual, and we've learned over the years, like you hit the nail on the head. It's everything. It's what happened to you when you were 3 years old. It happened to you in high school. Throughout your career and your life, that's how these calls affect one person versus the other. It's not that it's just a traumatic run. It's a traumatic run for a purpose.
Absolutely.
There's something behind it.
Yeah.
It might not even be a traumatic run. It might be a trigger.
That's what I mean. You might have had something as a kid.
You're like, what? Yeah, so what? I smell that thing. When I smell tahini, I'm back in Dearborn, man. Anywhere I'm at, if I smell tahini, I'm like, But that goes for the negative stuff, too.
Because your family grew up in Dearborn.
Yes, and I know where I'm at, you know what I mean? I'm at the New Yasmin Bakery in my memories right there.
Great cheese pies.
Amazing.
Yep.
Speaking of which, if you're in town, you
okay.
Check those out too, bro.
All right, we got a list.
But the point being is that those types of things can trigger negative thoughts too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a great point, and I'm glad you brought it up. It is not always trauma-based.
Yes.
I mean, we can have a call for service that has zero trauma involved by definition, or by definition of critical incident.
Right.
But it's a reaction. You know, one of the personal stories I talk about is my father was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I took care of him for 6 months, and he died in our home in hospice. Then you go back to work and you run calls for service that have no trauma, but you might be dealing with an elderly patient. You might have a hospice call related event, and you just sit there in that personal life connection. It's hard putting Mike face on all of a sudden when I just realized what I just did for 6 months for my father.
And now you're talking to the family, they're talking, but like you're thinking about your dad. You're missing half the stuff they're telling. Yeah.
So you wrap up that call, you get in the rig, you get in the ambulance, you get in the cruiser, you hang up the 911 call, whatever it might be, and you think, wow, there's that personal connection to that. And there is no way to teach and educate on that. There's just a way to be aware of it. Yes. Something might pop up out of the blue, and you're like, well, why did that call bother me?
The education
anybody else
is teaching people to be, I
know that it's coming.
Know that it happened,
and
then know what to have a plan to do something with it.
Yes.
Because if you know you have triggers, you know what you got to do to then diffuse that information. And I think that's the key.
Oh, yeah.
You learn. We're all the same in that we get triggered and we need to do something with it. That's the cookie cutter part. The rest of it is individual.
You know, the follow-up to that, too, is where we struggle as a profession across the board under this umbrella is now all of a sudden you go on a call like that, and it might have bothered you a little bit, and we're all like, that wasn't that big.
It was a hospice call. We've got,
And then we start finger pointing, and as a profession, I think that's killing us because we don't realize
we're
our
worst enemies.
Oh, my gosh.
But I think if you get to know the people that you work with, you get to know the individuals, you know, if that's
and then if you don't use it against them.
Yes. But I think as a as a group, if you get to know the people you work with and you have something like that, like I know you just went through 6 months taking care of your father on hospice, and we go on a hospice run, I should be checking up on you. I should be like, hey, dude.
Should be.
That's for everybody. You should be doing these things. But if you don't get to know the people that you work with, you're not going to know those things, and you're not going to know to check up on them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important, whether you're by yourself in a police cruiser, but know the team that you're working
with.
Or wherever it is, get to know them on a personal level, not just work Mike or work Jeff or whatever it might be, because it's those things that you talk about that if I don't talk to you and I don't learn about your life and I don't understand these things, when they happen, I don't know to talk to you about them.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's a hospice call, whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if I know that you just did that for 6 months, I'm sure as hell going to be like, hey, dude, you good? You good with it?
You know, and that's one of the big things that, you know, in our career survival class, we break out a little segment on that, on organizational leadership and fellow responder leadership and the family leadership. And we really need all three of those on that triangle to cover this, to make sure that we're addressing that. When you have that type of event, someone's aware of it. You know, kid calls. You know, kid call. Every first responder, you could do a whole podcast just on kid calls. But now, do you know exactly?
That's not.
But now, let's say you know your crew, and you know you've got a crew member or a responder or a dispatcher that takes that call, and all of a sudden you know that they have a 3-year-old home, and they're on that call with that 3-year-old. You know, putting those pieces of the puzzle together are important. That. It affects people differently, and having an understanding that maybe that one individual exposed to that event is going to be a little bit different than everybody else on that scene.
Yes,
absolutely, and that's key.
Absolutely, and go talk to them. Yeah, it's not that hard. Just go talk to them. Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah,
and it's that simple. Like nobody needs to have all this peer support training and whatever. It's just go talk to them.
Yeah,
just be better coworkers.
That's it. Be a better human.
Take care of each other. We are freaking good at running out that door and going and dealing with complete strangers. But dang it, can we be a little bit better?
Yes, there's a protocol for that.
Yes,
there's education for dealing with them, and I can walk away from them at the end of the call. So,
absolutely.
So, but and I, being a bit sarcastic, but in a way, I can avoid the real feelings with the people I encounter on calls. I can't avoid it when it's my crewmate.
Amen.
And I want to sometimes, right? Because I don't want to talk to him about his maybe I don't have it that day, right? And that's a tough thing to suck it up and be like, that dude needs a shoulder.
And I think that's a big struggle for us, again, under the whole umbrella of who we're talking about today, is because when you're having interaction with a call for service, when you're answering those 911 calls, when you're dealing with an inmate, not generally is that personal connection. You're going through policy, procedure, training. You're just going through the motions, getting them the help they need. But when it's a brother or sister, you look in the eye and say, hey, man, you struggling with suicidal thoughts, or you've been smelling like booze a lot, you're terrified, because now this is real. This is a raw, real connection where when we're working in the community or in the jails or 911 calls, oftentimes we don't know those individuals. And exactly what you're saying, it's like, we're just going through the motions. Next call, bring it on.
So we the three of us could go all day.
Oh man,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's give some advice on our way out here, specifically from you, your perspective, no wrong answers, based on your experiences. And you, Mike, are the sum of all of your experiences, for better or worse, and you've seen a lot and helped a lot of people along the way. So how can policymakers, frontline leaders, and departments in general best support the mental and behavioral health of their personnel?
Please mandate it. Mandate it. I mean, I don't know
Mandate to be healthy?
Absolutely. Mandate you're healthy. I mandate it.
Yes, I order you.
Yes. Mandate this topic is somewhere in your training. Whether, over the years of different meetings, whether it's been chiefs meetings, whether it's been leadership meetings, whatever it might be, when we talk about the topic being wellness, talk about the topic for me personally, the career survival program, to come to your organization and do some education with your staff and your loved ones. Not that you mandate that. Something to do with mandating this discussion. Get it into academies. Get it into that core curriculum. Get it into new hires. Get it into their orientation. Work with the unions. Work with the training units. Work with your staff. Work with the supervisors, the chief, the captains, the supervisors on how do we make this more of a day-to-day communication. So when we do have the big one, it's normal behavior that we're saying, hey, that was a rough call.
Or you know what to do.
Yeah.
Instead of avoid it, you have a plan.
Yeah.
And I think having a plan allows people to do uncomfortable things.
Yep. Well, and the bigger part of that, too, is when we talk about, having all this in place before it happens. We're good in this line of work to reacting to things. That's what we do. Things happen, we react to it. Are we very good at proactive work? Not normally. And this is an area we need to be better proactive on. Have resources available that when your responder walks in your office and says, hey, I'm struggling, you know what to do. Because right now, it breaks my heart on how many times it goes into a panic mode. We don't have this in place. What is an EAP? Do we have an EAP? Do we have an employee assistance program? Do we have a counselor? What do we do? Who do we call? And that's what some of the great things that the Frontline's done too, is just putting all these resources in one place. Have them available now. So when something happens, you're prepared for that. Because I can go out on a limb and be pretty confident that something will at some point happen in your organization or with one of your personnel. And it doesn't matter if you're a small house and you call volumes low, or if you're the biggest one in the state of Michigan or the biggest in the nation, it will happen at some point. And that's one of the things is, are we prepared to help that individual when it comes? And if it's not you or your organizations, I can guarantee it's going to be your brother or sister that wears a uniform pretty close to yours. And we got to be better prepared for that. So educate yourself, understand what this stuff is. The supervisors that are out there, the managers, the bosses, the sheriffs, the directors, whatever those leadership positions are, have a little understanding of what the whole concept is. Stuff affects your people. It affects your people very, very differently. And what do we have in place that if somebody walks through your door, what are we doing with it? Just over and over the years, just had story after story of, a chief or somebody in a leadership position say, yeah, this happened. We didn't know what to do. And that can be so very damaging, because then all of a sudden the first few minutes of that responder, we still struggle with telling our brothers and sisters to reach out. So now when we get them to reach out, if we don't know what to do when we're telling them to reach out, we're going backwards, and now we may never get back.
We're going far backwards, because they're going to share that information.
Yep.
They might not share that they got help and they're doing better.
Right.
They'll definitely, if they feel burned,
sure,
everybody's going to know.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to be right.
That's how we're wired.
Yeah.
And you lost them.
Yeah.
You're never bringing them back to that table.
And it's not a
again.
place of mean. That person is sending a warning signal of, hey, the proverbial couldn't help me because they're not willing, or whatever it is.
And especially if you're doing the peer support stuff and the person's against it to begin with,
and
you get them finally to that point where they're like, all right, I'll go talk to somebody. And then they go, let me find a clinician. But no, you need to have this stuff
You need an
way
answer
before that part.
Absolutely.
Like for the peer support teams that are getting started, have all of this stuff before you start.
Or if you're starting one, consider all of this first.
Yes.
What do we do when somebody calls us?
Yes.
Now we need a team. What are we going to do?
Have a resource available at your fingertips.
Right.
When you get that person who you've talked to for 2 hours now, who finally is like, let's do this.
Yeah.
Make sure you have some place to send them. Give them a number.
And that's so important, because having that ready and available now. Don't wait until all of a sudden.
Yes.
All right, now I'm gonna try to play catch up, because it's sometimes we are dealing with people's lives.
Yep.
And we need to make sure that we are prepared for that. And I think we've gotten better and better and better at this, because what we're seeing now is there's some really core groups of professionals that I refer a lot of people to that are rock solid at working with first responders and their families. But what's starting to happen is they're getting so busy.
Yeah.
So we have created a good problem. But
We're having a
We've created
shortage.
demand,
Yes.
and hopefully this inspires
Yes.
many young behavioral health professionals to aim at us the same way they've aimed at kids, people with special needs,
and I think we're seeing that a little bit more and more frequently.
Yes.
I think what's cool to see is when young people go to school, being at Wayne State University, they have a great program. In fact, they run this.
Yes.
So we love them.
Shout out to Wayne State.
But you do talk to some of their younger, about to be grads, and you're like, did you know you could focus on first responders? And they're like, really?
Yeah.
So it's so new. It's cool that they're like, there's going to be a generation of humans like, no, I want to work directly with first responders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because my dad was of this, or my mom was of that, or I just think it's awesome.
Well, and it's that helping profession, that helping that
it's a different type of service industry.
My daughter went through the career survival class about 2 years ago, and she sat through the program. And she came home, and I asked my wife, I go, had she said much about it? She goes, no, she didn't say much. 2 days later, she came to my wife, and I said, hey, I'm going to go get my degree to be a counselor for first responders and their kids. And I looked at her, I said, how'd that happen? She goes, she sees the need. And then we were laughing, because my wife, because she wants to fix us.
Yeah. Well, A, she likes you enough to see that and to like want people to, she's like probably expressing, I want people to feel this love.
Yes.
And these are things that can help people like my mom and dad and the people that serve like them.
Yeah. In 7th grade, she wrote a hero paper, and it was about me and my career and balancing the career and being at home. And I didn't even know she did this.
Yeah.
And I said to my wife, I go, where did she come up with this information? She goes, she never asked me a question. So our little ones in this world are listening.
They pick up more than you know. They
see the good day and the bad day. You come home and you've got work face on, and they can recognize. Yeah. Our loved ones can tell when you had that bad shift or that bad day just by how you walk in the door.
They're not going to say it. They're going to do these little things. My oldest does this. Like, she knows what's up. Yeah. She can read me, and then she'll do something goofy in front of me that she's smiling at me a certain way. Like,
how's
I feel
Dad's
bad.
reaction going to be?
She knows.
I know.
Little son of a gun.
And sometimes we don't put enough thought into that. You know, it's just like we come home and go through the motions. Like, hey, they know. They know.
Oh no, my wife tells me.
Eggshells.
Luckily, my wife tells me.
I had a responder's wife say to me that when my loved one walks through the door, I know within the first 5 to 7 minutes of how long we need to walk on eggshells as a family.
Minutes? Oh,
5 to
30
7
seconds.
minutes.
You haven't been married that long, trust me.
Before we can realize, what interaction we can have with Dad or the husband or, the communication. And it's different for everyone. It could be 2 seconds or 3 minutes.
And I think people listening now that aren't first responders can all appreciate that.
Yeah.
Because we all go to work. Yeah. We've all had long days.
Yeah.
You come home. So, I don't want to minimize other people's issues.
No.
We just get exposed to other people so much
that
we become sensitive or desensitized and off kilter from it.
That's
Whereas,
huge.
but this is where we can connect with everybody.
Yep. It's a huge part of that.
Probably's come through the door at one time exhausted. So at least we can share that.
Well, and it's important to realize, too, that the first responders' relationship at home, our job shouldn't trump your loved one's job or your partner's job at home. But there are times that, depending on the exposure at work, it may need to be more of a priority that, you've had a bad day, you've had a bad day. Now we're sitting here trying to figure out who's better days or worser. And
those are where things start to divide because you're having two things fall apart at the same time. Yep. All right. So, Mike, you've been amazing to have around here. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, where they can find you, more information. Tell them all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at totherescue.com. It's spelled out TWO, the rescue.com. So TWOTHE, rescue, RESCUE.com, totherescue.com. My direct cell phone, give me a call, 616-262-8455. And I do everything I can to help.
That's a brave man.
Yes, a brave man right there.
You know what? I tell people every time I teach a class, I want to be a resource for them. And I have had people call me in crisis, and I've done everything in my possibility to help them. And if I'm available to answer the phone, I will. And I want to be a resource for people. I have handed out documents. I have handed out, emails. We try. You guys have been in the program. We try to print off certain handouts that are specific to the need of the audience, and I don't make that up. I'll do what I can to the best of my ability to give you whatever you need to get you pointed in the right direction. So that is my cell phone.
He
right
ain't
there.
BSing you.
Right on the hip.
That is his cell phone number. Let me tell you.
Yeah. So websites out
for
there.
Now.
Yeah.
Email. We go email info at totherescue.com. Again, spell it TWOTHE rescue, RESCUE.com. Info at totherescue. So,
and we'll put it up in the
show notes and everything.
Love to be a resource for whoever's out there, or questions, comments, concerns. Or I love what you guys are doing. I love this whole program and everything. The direction we're going is huge, and obviously taking care of our own here in the state of Michigan and do what we can to spread from there. So
absolutely. Thanks for coming on.
Appreciate you guys, and thanks for what you guys do.
No, thanks for
keep doing the work you do.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. We could probably have 3 more shows.
We're definitely going to have more.
Yeah, I got another 6 hours of breath to talk. So
perfect.
Cut me off.
Perfect.
All right.
Have a good night.
Thank you for joining us on the Minds on the Frontline podcast. We hope everyone enjoyed this episode. We have more great content coming out soon. Please check us out on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and make sure to like and subscribe to all Minds on the Frontline podcast social media channels. Thank you for listening to the Minds on the Frontline podcast. Have a great day.